Welcome to Secure Money Mindset, the ultimate podcast for financial planning tips and strategies. Our episodes are designed to be concise and to the point, lasting no more than 30 minutes. Each episode features seasoned advisors from Secure Planning Group or an outside financial specialist discussing crucial issues and providing actions to consider when addressing your top financial concerns. We value honesty and transparency, meaning we present both the good and the bad news in a clear and concise manner. Our goal is to provide you with reliable insights and practical guidance. Be sure to hit the follow button to stay up to date with our latest episodes. For more information, please visit our website at securepg.net. Let's dive into this week's episode of Secure Money Mindset.
Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Rothbard, financial advisor with Secure Planning Group. And today, our special guest is another Josh Kirschenbaum, who is an attorney and mediator for New Hope Divorce and Mediation. The topic of our podcast today is exploring divorce mediation. Josh is going to talk a little bit about his journey into mediation and becoming a mediator. Josh, welcome.
Thanks, Josh.
And as we get started, why don't we talk a little bit about the advantages of mediation over other traditional methods of divorce?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest difference between getting divorced through mediation and getting divorced the traditional way through going to court is who makes the decisions. So a big question that you have to ask yourself when you're getting divorced is, do we want other people making decisions for us and resolving our conflict for us? Or do we want to stay in the driver's seat and be the ones who create the agreements ourselves? That's the biggest difference. When you go to court, what you're doing is you are turning the decisions over to a judge. And the process is, generally speaking, you hire lawyers to make arguments to a judge, hoping that the judge will side with you. And you hope, and you don't really have any control over what the outcome is going to be. You do not control what the judge says. In mediation, you are keeping control of the outcome. It's a voluntary process where both spouses come together and they create their agreement together with the help of a professional called a mediator, who is a neutral third party, who's a professional, who can help guide you through the process, help you have the conversations that you need to have, but ultimately is not making decisions for you, is not telling you what you must do or what even the mediator thinks you should do. So these are two very different processes. Josh, one of the ways that I like to describe this is when you mediate, you could sort of imagine being in a car that has two steering wheels. There's two seats in the front, each with a steering wheel, a brake, and a gas pedal. And the spouses are each sitting in one of those seats. And the mediator is sitting in the back seat, helping make sure you don't drive off the road. But ultimately, you're the ones that are at the wheel, and you have to drive together. When you litigate, there's one driver's seat with one steering wheel, one gas, and one brake, and the judge is sitting in that seat. The lawyers are in the back seat, yelling at the judge, trying to get him to go the way they want to go. And you and your spouse are in the trunk or in the back seat, hoping that the lawyers win the arguments. Two very different processes.
So that makes a lot of sense and great analogy. Why don't you talk a little bit about maybe the cost effectiveness of mediation versus litigation?
So now that you kind of have a basic idea of what the difference is, you can see why these two processes have very different costs. So on the one hand, when you go to court and when you use lawyers, you are each paying a lawyer on an hourly basis, which when you're paying lawyers, you're talking about paying on a minute by minute basis, usually at hundreds of dollars an hour, $400, $500, $600 an hour for each lawyer. Each lawyer is going to charge a retainer right up front, an initial retainer for each of you that could be $5,000 to $8,000 just to get in the door with each lawyer. And then you're paying for every minute of their time. And because they're the ones that are making all the arguments to the judge, and they're the ones doing all the talking for you, everything costs a lot of money. And because you're not really cooperating with one another and everything's a fight, it takes a really long time. It can take years sometimes to resolve a divorce. But with mediation, it's a completely different structure. So for example, at New Hope, where I'm a mediator, you'd be working with one mediator. So the two of you sharing with one mediator, we charge on a flat fee basis, not on an hourly basis, one fee. And that fee is typically less than one retainer for one initial retainer for one lawyer for one of the spouses. And our flat fee would cover all of the services, not just the mediation services, but then helping you write up your agreement and assisting you with filing your papers in court. So it's a completely different cost structure. The two biggest things are the amount of money that you're spending, but also the predictability of it. When you go through lawyers, you really don't know ultimately what the whole thing is going to cost on a month-to-month basis. With a flat fee, you know what the whole thing is going to cost upfront.
And so with the predictability, maybe talk about the timeline as well. So litigation seems like it could be very open-ended.
Yeah.
And mediation perhaps is not.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing to know is it's sort of reality here. The reality is that in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, in every state in the country, you can get married instantaneously. You cannot get divorced instantaneously. It's not possible. Like in Pennsylvania, for example, there's simply too many steps that you have to go through. Even if you were doing this completely on your own, perfectly amicably, everybody's cooperating about everything and you have the simplest situation in the world, it's still going to be several months before you're going to be able to be divorced. There's just no two ways about it. You still have to file papers with the court. You still have to wait for the judge to issue the divorce decree. There's a built-in cost, built-in time, no matter what. The thing about mediation is we try to keep that overall time to a minimum. So you're not fighting with each other about every little thing. You're sharing information with each other freely. You're not communicating through attorneys. You're not filing petitions and doing discovery through the courts. None of that. So all of the time that you're spending is actually spent getting you to the finish line. There's no detours like that. With litigation, it's open-ended. You're right. It's completely open-ended. It could take a year. It could take 2 years. There's no end to how long it could take. It just depends how long and how many things you're going to fight about and how long it takes the lawyers to do what they need to do and for the judge to do what the judge needs to do. So when you're paying for the longer process on an hourly basis to two lawyers, the time and the cost are directly related to each other. With mediation, at least with us, because we work on a flat fee, the time and the cost don't really have much to do with each other. So the whole process for us, most people get through the entire process, meaning all their mediations, writing up their agreements, filing everything with the court, waiting for the judge to issue the decree. 6 to 9 months is typical.
Wow, that's pretty significant.
Which is light speed. It's
Yeah.
light speed compared to what could be an open-ended process that could take years.
Great. Okay, why don't we talk now a little bit about the role of a financial advisor in the mediation process? What's your experience with using financials in the mediation process?
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing to say is that because mediation is a cooperative process, right, where the spouses are agreeing to work together, and the mediator is working as a neutral, right? It's a process that lends itself really well to bringing in other types of professionals to help. And I guess the important thing to realize here is that when you're going through divorce, there's a lot of different types of professionals who can be very, very helpful to you. Every professional has their own lane that they kind of need to stay in. So for example, with a mediator, so I'm an attorney, I have a law license, I'm licensed to practice law, but when I'm mediating, I'm not working as an attorney. I'm not able to give you legal advice. I'm not able to provide legal representation. I have to serve as a facilitator. I can provide you a lot of information, but there's a limit to the kind of information that I can provide you with. And that's even the same for your attorney. There's a limit to the types of information your attorney can even provide to you. So that brings us to this category of sort of specialized information. There are things that mediators and lawyers just don't know well enough, the way that financial advisors do. You're going to have all kinds of questions about your financial future, about the long-term financial implications of different agreements that you might reach, about how to divide retirement assets or about how to divide investment accounts. there's all kinds of financial planning informations that your mediator, your lawyer, we're just not qualified to answer, but you still need this information. So one of the things that we do as mediators is we connect you with other professionals like a financial planner who can answer those questions. So because the financial concerns that people have are typically, along with the kids, the number one concern that people have when they're going through divorce, having a really experienced financial planner who has experience helping people who are going through divorce is a huge asset. It gives you more information and it helps you make better decisions. Because remember how we were talking about how you're in the driver's seat? Well, if you're in the driver's seat, you want to be as well informed as possible about what's ahead. And the way you do that is by bringing other people onto your team. Add people to your team. Surround yourself with people who know what they're doing, who can help you understand the tax consequences, who can help you understand the long and short-term financial consequences, who can educate you about types of assets that you may not understand. So Josh, one of the things that I know happens all the time is divorce is often the very first time people have actually looked at all of their finances at once. They've never done it before. This is the most common thing.
And
right?
so it's things like stock options and RSUs and maybe annuities and pensions that people know that they have, and they know that will help them one day to help them achieve their financial goals, but they don't quite know how they actually work.
They don't know how they work, right? And they don't know what's better for them in the long run to, split them up, to do an offset on them. There's all kinds of decisions that have to get made. And whether you're going through mediation or working with attorneys, whatever you're doing, you need to talk to somebody who can explain what these assets are, how they work, and what the implications of different decisions would be, which your mediator and even your attorney might not be able to do. So we love working with financials. We love when our mediation participants are connected with financial advisors like you, because they come to their mediation sessions much more well-informed and more comfortable with the decisions that they're making. Because when you're the ones that are creating the agreements, you have to feel comfortable signing it in the end. And the more you know, and the more professional advice that you've gotten along the way, the more comfortable you're going to feel about that. And when it's about your finances, which is, again, it's the biggest thing people are concerned about when they're going through divorce, it's right up there with the kids, because the truth is, it directly affects their kids, right? Their financial decisions directly affect their children. So the more information you can get, the more guidance you can get from financial advisors, the better. And they can plug right into the mediation process. They can work with both spouses together. They can work with the spouses separately. They can talk to the mediator. They can be a seamless part of this process.
And again, I think this kind of the use of a financial advisor kind of separates the mediation process from the litigation process, in that in litigation, your attorneys are fighting for as many assets as possible, not really taking into account, like you were talking about before, the tax implications, or even how ultimately those assets are going to affect your future ability to achieve your financial goals and maintain your standard of living.
Right. They're just a different set of priorities. The questions that the attorneys are looking at, the questions that you're looking at, you might not even know what questions to ask. And I think that's honestly the biggest thing that people say. They say, we don't know what we don't know.
Yep.
We don't know. That's why a lot of people are not just doing their divorces themselves. You can do your divorce yourself. You're not required to have lawyers. You're not required to have a mediator. You are allowed to get divorced just on your own. But the reason why people usually don't do that is because they don't know what they don't know, and they don't want to make a mistake in such an important set of decisions. So how do you deal with that? Well, you talk to people who do know what you don't know. And in this case, the people who know about the financial implications of your investments and of splitting them now, that's a financial advisor. It's not your mediator. It's not your lawyer. It's a financial advisor. And getting one on your team makes a huge difference.
I could not have said that better myself as a financial advisor. Appreciate you saying that. So Josh, now I want to talk a little bit about some case studies or some success stories that you've had in mediation. Why don't you talk a little bit about maybe a high net worth case and maybe a case that isn't as high net worth, and the differences in those, and how you've been able to walk those clients through the path to a successful resolution.
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing to say is that mediation can be suitable for a whole wide range of situations. It's not just for the easy cases. It's not just for the hard cases. We have worked with families all across every spectrum you can imagine. So from situations where you have two high level executives with lots of executive compensation and RSUs and stock options and pensions and excess plans and SARs and all kinds of
non-qualified
yeah,
deferred compensation,
all kinds
yeah.
of things, and who have multiple real estate holdings, large investment accounts. And on the one hand, you might think, well, those are the really complicated cases. But what's really interesting is that what determines whether the case is complicated or not, right, often is how well do the people understand what their assets are, right? And how many options do they really have in the situation? In some ways, people who have more assets have more options. There's more room to be creative and flexible. They can make more decisions together that could achieve the results that they want. As long as, now, what I have found is that in mediation, my job is to first understand what these assets are enough to be able to help people have the conversations. Oftentimes, the spouses are not on the same page in terms of what these assets are. Sometimes there's one spouse that knows a lot more about them than the other.
So there's like a financial literacy.
Yeah, there's a financial
issue.
literacy issue, exactly. And to some extent, I can help them by giving them information about what these assets are and how they work and what decisions they have to make. But there's a point at which I have to say, I strongly urge you to talk with a financial advisor about this. So high net worth cases, we can help them come up with all kinds of creative solutions. So, maybe they don't want to divide up a pension or a 401k using a qualified domestic relations order. Maybe they'd rather just do an offset of that asset with another asset that they have. So
when you say an offset, so instead of dividing up the 401k, there could be tax issues there. Maybe it's instead taking equity out of the home or dividing up bank accounts.
Yeah, a good example would be one person has $2 million in their 401k, and they want to divide up that as part of their divorce process. And so they want $1 million to go to each spouse. Well, one way to do that is by literally getting an order that would order the plan to carve out half of that and give it to the other spouse as their own 401k. There's a whole process for that. Some people don't want to go through all that, and they say, you know what, forget it. We're not going to touch the 401k, but instead, since it's $1 million that you would be getting, instead, the house has about $1 million of equity in that. We're going to sell it anyway. You get the equity in the house, and we call it a day. Now, when you have lots of assets, you can do things like that. It's called an offset. When you don't have the ability to do that, when you don't have another asset that's worth, say, half of what that retirement account is worth, you can't do that. You have to go through the process of dividing it out with a quadro. So with folks that don't have vast amounts of resources and assets, mediation is still a great process. So now you might have fewer options and alternatives, but knowing what those options and alternatives are is really all you need to get to the end. Because remember, what's your alternative? Your alternative is to go do this through lawyers. So if you don't have a lot of assets to begin with, or every asset that you have is more precious and valuable to you, you don't want to be spending that money fighting with each other. You want to rely on the fact that you have an efficient process. You're going to save tens of thousands of dollars by cooperating with each other. That frees up possibilities and for you to divide your assets in different ways. And you want to work with people who know enough to be able to make sure that they can put you on the right track. So for example, when it comes to 401ks, lots of people have 401ks. You don't have to be Bill Gates to have a 401k or a pension. Lots of people have them. What do you do when you want to divide that up? Well, like you said, you could just take the money out of the 401k, but then you're going to get hit with taxes and penalties.
Sure.
So there's a way to do it. There's a way to get a special order that carves it out when you're going through divorce and that doesn't trigger the taxes and penalties, but you have to be working with people who know what they're doing in that. And we can do that whether people are high net worth or whether they're not. it doesn't make any difference.
Do you see a difference in the length of time that the process takes based on net worth? Is it if someone has a higher net worth, do you see that this process takes longer, or?
Yeah, not necessarily. So it's interesting. You might think that, oh, the more assets you have and the more money you have, the longer it takes. I think that's a very natural thing to assume. But honestly, it doesn't really necessarily work out that way. Sometimes it requires more conversations because there's more assets, but oftentimes it's easier for people who have more to figure out ways to divide it up. If you have fewer assets and every asset is more precious and you have fewer options and alternatives, it could be harder sometimes to reach agreements because the stakes are a bit higher, because there are deeper concerns that people who are trying to make ends meet as a couple, how are they going to do that now in two homes, in two families? And so when that emotional pressure and stress and financial pressure and stress is higher, that can actually make it a little more difficult for people to reach agreements, and it can make things take a little bit longer. So it really depends on the situation. But in all cases, working with somebody, working with people who are there to help you move through those challenges rather than get stuck and fighting with each other is going to be really helpful. Overall, mediation processes move so much faster than litigation processes, and as real cost so much less. And it doesn't matter whether you are making $1 million a year or whether you're making $50,000 a year. It's going to be faster than the alternative.
So you kind of bring up a good point. It's not necessarily about net worth, but just in terms of the parties being amicable with each other. How important is that for mediation? And is that a determining factor to go into mediation versus maybe litigation?
I think I'm glad you asked this question. There is I think a myth, an understandable but nevertheless incorrect myth, that mediation is only for people who are really getting along with each other. Mediation is a dispute resolution method. Mediation is used in all kinds of conflicts. Mediation is used in wars, in hostage situations, right? I mean, mediation is potentially a process for people who are extremely adverse to each other. You don't have to be friends with each other to go through mediation. You don't have to even like each other to go through mediation. And frankly, many people that are going through divorce aren't in the greatest place of liking each other at that very moment. What you have to do is you have to be willing to actually communicate and talk to the other person. You have to be able to articulate what your interests are. You have to be able to make decisions that are based on the available alternatives to you, and to rely on other professionals to help guide you through it. You don't have to be buddy-buddy with each other. Now, obviously, if you're not willing to talk to each other, if you're hiding information from each other, if you are, fighting with each other so badly that you can't talk to each other, that you feel threatened by each other, the process probably won't work. But then again, what's your alternative? Your alternative is to do that at $600 an hour each through your lawyers. So those are the realities. If you can accept the fact that those are the choices that you have, then you don't have to be chummy with each other to get through this process well.
So you don't really have to be amicable, but you have to trust the process.
Yeah, you have to. It's a voluntary process. You have to have concluded that this process overall is better than the alternative that you have. You see it as it's your family's money, and how are we going to spend it? Are we going to spend it? Are we going to grin and bear it and find our way through this with the help of our mediator, or are we going to pay this money to the lawyers to fight for us, and so a judge makes the decision for us?
Perfect. So Josh, when people are exploring the mediation process, what kind of questions do they ask you prior to entering that process?
So there's a bunch of what I would call frequently asked questions. In fact, we put up on our website a bunch of them. What are the frequently asked questions here? But let's just talk about a few. Really common situations that people are in. They co-own a house together, and people are concerned, what are we going to do with the house? Big concern right now, big question we get right now from the vast majority of people. The house is the most valuable asset that they have. For some people, it's the only real asset of value that they have. And they want to keep the house. One of them they feel it's important for one reason or another for one of them to remain living in the house. And they don't know how to do that while going through divorce because they have some general idea that spouse is going to have to buy the other spouse out of the house, but they don't necessarily know how to go about doing that. And people are very concerned these days about the prospect of having to refinance their house.
Right, we're in a much higher
Right.
interest rate environment now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you're talking to a lot of people that have mortgages at 3.25%,
Yep.
where now the prevailing rate could be, over 6%.
Yes. And so one question that we get all the time is, how can we do this in a way that we don't wind up, with an unaffordable mortgage payment?
Right.
And what's really great about doing this through the mediation process, what we tell people is there are professionals that can actually give you real answers to this question with real dollars and cents. And what we're finding is that in many situations, people assume, understandably, that if they refinance their home and they wind up with this higher interest rate, that they won't be able to afford the payments. But then when they actually sit down with a professional who can run the numbers for them, they actually find that they can.
Yep.
And that actually it's be better for them to go ahead and do that refinance and buyout than to continue co-owning the house together after the divorce, which is something that a lot of people come in wondering if they can do. Could we continue to co-own the house after divorce? So questions about the house, really common. That and co-ownership of assets in general. A lot of people, particularly people that are coming to mediation, who maybe are actually pretty amicable with each other. They're not killing each other. They're not, hating each other. They view themselves as being still friends, and they want to be remaining so afterwards. There are people who say, can't we just continue to co-own this stuff after the divorce? Can we have an agreement that does that? And can we just both still own the house for indefinitely? Can we still own the bank accounts together indefinitely, right? And so the first thing I like to say about this is it's great when you're coming to mediation to be coming with an open mind to all sorts of possibilities and options. Your mediator is not there to tell you, you mustn't do this, I don't think you should do this, this is wrong, but rather to help you explore what the variety of options are. So when people are coming to us with these very common questions about co-owning assets, about what to do with, the house, we first of all remind them you're in the right process. If you want to be able to brainstorm ideas, to put different options on the table and see what the implications might be, this is the process for that. And when you go to court, they will do pretty much a one-size-fits-all. This is how it's going to be. This is the way we're going to look at your asset. This is how we're going to divide them up. It's not really custom made to you. So people frequently are asking about all these creative ideas and possibilities. I'd say that's one thing.
So it's interesting, just in hearing you speak, we talked about the importance of having a financial advisor in this process, but it seems like this process lends itself to bringing in a mortgage professional.
Sure.
Or a pension specialist.
Yeah.
Are there any other professionals that maybe you've brought into the process
Sure.
before that? And again, to kind of separate this or differentiate this from litigation.
Yeah. So you mentioned too just now, there are certified divorce lending professionals, mortgage brokers who specialize in helping people who are going through divorce, who can give you real tangible numbers about what the cost would be to continue owning the home, what the cost would be to refinance. Would you qualify to refinance? Would you qualify to be the sole mortgage holder on that property, given your assets, your income, right? Certified divorce lending professionals. There are realtors who specialize in helping people who need to sell their home, right? Or where one spouse is going to be needing to buy another home. There are lots of financial advisors, there's therapists, coaches. There's all sorts of people that can help folks who are going through divorce. When you choose a process that is collaborative and cooperative like mediation, you can make use of all types of professionals. And many of these professionals, it doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money to work with them. And the money that they would save you by helping you make a good decision about something as valuable as your house. That whole example of, geez, if I take on a higher interest rate, am I going to make a higher mortgage payment? In the grand scheme of your divorce, the amount of money additional that you might spend on the mortgage, you would make that back just by making a better decision about how to divide up your assets overall.
Yep.
It would be a no-brainer. But until people actually get the opportunity to see that and to talk with somebody that they trust and to run the numbers and look at it, it's very hard to see that.
So as a mediator and identifying these situations, are you the one that brings the professionals to the table, or do you ask the clients to bring their professionals to the table, or is it a combination?
Well, the mediation process is always controlled by the participants. So I can't require anybody to bring in an outside professional.
Mm-hmm.
Many times people do come in with their own professionals that they're working with, whether it's a financial advisor or a tax or CPA or an accountant, a lawyer, a therapist. There's people who are already working with folks. What I can do is if I see that people are in need or expressing some sort of a need for additional information, and I know of somebody who could provide it, I would certainly mention that. And I would certainly say to folks, hey, if you would like the names of some financial advisors or a certified divorce lending professional, almost nobody comes into the mediation process knowing that such people even exist. I can give them names of folks that I know are very good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So Josh, we talked a lot about mediation and how it's a valuable process, especially when dealing with finances. Why don't we talk a little bit about how important this process is when we talk about children of parents going through divorce?
Yeah, well, I think I alluded to it a little bit, but the biggest thing that people are really concerned about when they have children, particularly when they have young children, the biggest thing that people are concerned about is protecting their kids. Protecting their kids, not just financially, but emotionally. Most people that are coming, in fact, almost all people that are coming to mediation or considering mediation, they're considering it in part because they know how destructive a contentious, lawyered up litigation type divorce could be for their children. They don't want their children to be caught in the middle. They don't want their children's, futures to be compromised because of the financial decisions that they're making right now to spend the money on lawyers. Kids don't do well when they see their parents going through that kind of acrimonious divorce. So they're looking for a way that they can do it as efficiently and quickly as possible, but also in a way that shows their children that their parents still are able to navigate and they're able to communicate with each other. A lot of people, they realize that long after the divorce is done, they're still going to be parents.
Mm-hmm.
So that's true whether your children are young or whether they're old. But particularly people who have young kids understand that one of the things they have to work out in this mediation is they have to work out custody. They have to work out the kid's schedule. They have to work out what are their children's lives going to look like on a day-to-day basis? Where are they going to live? What is their relationship going to be like between the children and each parent and between the two former spouses as co-parents? We deal with all of that in mediation. And again, it's in the hands of the participants. So people know nowhere more so than with their children. People don't want other people making decisions for them. People get very uncomfortable with the idea of a judge being the one that decides what their co-parenting schedule is going to be, what their communication between the two parents is going to look like, right? Let alone amounts of child support and alimony and stuff like that. People want to maintain control over their experiences and their lives as parents. Mediation keeps you in the driver's seat about that. And it also, for a lot of people, it's a way that they can say to their kids, as difficult as this process is and as sad as the children will be about the divorce, they can say to their children that the parents have chosen a way forward that is cooperating with each other, that's respectful of each other, where they're trying to do it in a way that's peaceful. And people feel good about that. They feel good being able to tell their children that they have chosen this path in large part because they care about the children, they care about them, and they care about each other. Kids need to know that their parents still care about each other and that they care about them. And by choosing a process like this, you can, with a straight face and honesty, say, that's why we chose to do it this way and not that way.
So before we talked about bringing other professionals into this process, Are there professionals, mental health professionals that you would bring in, specifically for coaching the parents so they could know how to
Yeah,
talk to their
well,
kids?
again, the mediator doesn't typically bring people in so much as respond to the needs that the participants are expressing. So if there are parents this has happened before, there have been many people start the mediation process and they haven't told their kids yet that they're getting divorced. It's very common. And they are looking for help with how to do that. And there definitely are therapists that can work with parents on how to tell your children that you're getting divorced. If you have already done so and the child is really struggling with this, there are therapists that can work with the children, that can even work with the parents and the children together. So mediators that have been doing this for a long time know who the good people are out there that do this work, and can certainly give you a list of names and say, listen, these people can really help with the following situations. So yeah, absolutely. There's whole community, there's a whole like network of folks that can help with every type of situation that arises.
All right, Josh. So we spoke about bringing other professionals into this process. You're an attorney, but in this process, you're the mediator. You're not advocating for one party over the other. Uh, do clients have the ability to bring in their own attorneys to this process?
I'm very glad you asked this question. So you might think, based on what I've been talking about in terms of how expensive litigation is and about how litigation and mediation are sort of alternatives to each other, that you might be wondering, well, is there any role for attorneys in this at all? And the answer is yes. There are ways of going through mediation, but also still working with attorneys as well. So most of the time, and certainly in the mediation that I practice, the attorneys don't come to the mediation sessions. It's just the spouses and the mediator that are at those sessions. But many people do want to have an attorney that they can consult with, that they could ask for legal advice from, that they can get the kind of information that they can't get from the mediator and that they can't get from any other. They know that to some extent divorce is a legal process. They want to be able to have a lawyer that they can ask those types of questions to and get advice from, right? But the challenge is to be working with a lawyer who respects the fact that you have chosen mediation as your way of resolving your dispute. And not every lawyer is going to be as excited and enthusiastic about the fact that you're choosing mediation for a variety of reasons. But if you have made the decision together to be in the driver's seat, then the attorneys that you work with are going to need to be ones that support that and that will work with you as in a consulting capacity, but who are not going to, pull the car over to the side of the road and get you into a legal fight with each other that's going to wind you up in court.
So they're not there to sabotage the process.
No, they're not there to sabotage it.
They're there to enhance the process for each part.
Yeah, and so for example, one of the things that we do as mediators at my practice is that we will actually write up your agreements for you in the end. You've done all your mediation sessions, you've reached all your agreements, we write it up, and before you sign it, you might want to take it to an attorney to look it over and to give you advice, and lots of people do that. And there are many attorneys out there who are excellent family law attorneys who will be happy to do that. They'd be happy to serve in a consulting capacity. We sometimes call them review attorneys or consulting attorneys. Mm-hmm. And they will be there for you as you need them. And they can review your agreement. They can give you some suggestions and edits. They can help you. They can help you even before your mediation sessions to come in feeling more knowledgeable and more prepared about what your options are. Finding that relationship with a good consulting attorney, as opposed to an attorney that doesn't respect the fact that you're in the mediation and is not looking to support you in that way, makes a huge difference. So I love it when participants are working with attorneys that are supportive of the mediation process. They really add a lot of value to it. Does it wind up costing a little bit more in the end? Yes, you're paying another professional some amount of money. But it's even when you're working with a consulting attorney, even when you're working with a mediator, even when you're working with a financial consultant and other professionals, it's nowhere near as expensive as when you're going through full-on litigation with attorneys. It's extremely difficult to come up with a process that would be more expensive than that. So here you are using attorneys, but you're using them very judiciously. You're using them very efficiently. And in the end, that will help you. If that helps you feel better about the agreement that you're going to sign, it's worth it. So one of the things that we can definitely do is we can give you some names of attorneys that we know that have worked with people that have gone through our mediation process and have done a great job supporting them, and who haven't torpedoed their mediation process. We can help you find folks like that.
So really, at the end of the day, the participants in mediation, they just want to make sure that maybe their rights are protected.
Yeah.
As a bottom line.
That's right. Lots of people say, I want to know what my rights are. It's a perfectly legitimate thing to want to know. But in the end, you really can only know that from consulting with an attorney. Your mediator is not going to be able to give you legal advice. But knowing that the participants have come into the mediation session educated about what their rights are by an attorney, that can be helpful. It doesn't necessarily dictate what the outcome is going to be, right? When you're in mediation, you can come up with solutions that a court would never come up with. You're free to do that. So the law doesn't tell you what you have to do, usually. There's a couple of things that the law says you can't do. But by and large, most people just want the peace of mind to know that they talked to a lawyer, they got some idea of their rights, but they didn't waste a lot of time and money.
Josh, thank you so much for participating in our podcast today. I think the information that you gave was invaluable, and I think it really helps people understand the difference between the mediation process and the litigation process, especially when it comes to issues such as cost, the time that the process could take, how important this process is when we're dealing with children. It seems like mediation can possibly be a great avenue for people who are looking for alternatives to traditional litigation. So as we finish up, Josh, I want to give you an opportunity to just give our audience some information about your website, phone number, how to contact you, and also any final thoughts that you may have.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. This was great. So there's plenty to learn about this process and the way we do it at New Hope Divorce Mediation. So we work with families in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, all across the state. Most of our mediation sessions are done on Zoom. We sometimes work with people in person if they want. Most people are doing it by Zoom these days. You can call us. You can go onto our website and contact us. And you can get the opportunity for you and your spouse to talk with one of our mediators, to talk with me, to talk with Karen, face-to-face on Zoom for an hour for free to find out more about this process. We can help you get into a better place to know whether this is the right path for you. It doesn't cost you anything to give us a call, to even do a 1-hour consultation with us. Our website is www.newhopedivorcemediation.com. I think there'll be a link to that somewhere below the video here. Yeah. Talk to your spouse. If this is something you want to consider together, set up a 1-hour consultation with us on Zoom.
And that's no obligation.
No obligation
Perfect.
at all. It's free, and it'll put you in a good position to know, is mediation right for you, and are we a good fit for you as mediators? And you will come away with it with a really good understanding of that.
All right. Again, Josh, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. Again, I think the information that we talked about is invaluable. And if anybody has additional questions, certainly feel free to reach out to us at Secure Planning Group. And Josh also gave his contact information. Thanks everybody for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode.